third night we was there, he left a $100 tip for a waiter. The waitress came back to make sure, hey, is this right? And he was like, yeah, it is right. And so a lot of things came across my mind when he did that, which is one, would she would have came back if we was white? Because we was the only black people in that restaurant. So that was
no, this can't be right.
You are now listening to the thoughts and sounds of IC the God King. This is the IC Experience.
the long way.
The long way.
Yeah. There you go.
Call him Pee-wee.
What up, my boy?
What's up? What's good? Hold on, let me get situated.
Get situated.
Yeah.
How you been?
Great.
It's been
great.
It's been about 2 weeks again. We keep having these 2 week. What's it been, 2 weeks?
Yeah, the holidays, The holidays kind of threw things a little bit out of whack there.
Yeah, it did. But I'm glad that we fought through the challenges so we can feed the streets again,
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So this time we switching it up a little better, because I think each time we do an episode we get a little better. And normally what the process is, we kind of have a conversation before we film.
Right.
This time I did kind of slightly talk to you about it. So I just came from out of town and with a good friend of mine, and we went to New York City, and in being in New York, I did a lot of comparing, like New York and Atlanta kind of deal. And one thing I noticed was my friend, he is truly blessed financially, and he felt compelled to do good for people, and I witnessed him do it multiple times. And I asked him on the third night we was there, he left a $100 tip for a waitress. And the waitress came back to make sure, hey, is this right? And he was like, yeah, it is right, And so a lot of things came across my mind when he did that. Which is one, she would have came back if we was black, if we was white. Because we was the only black people in that restaurant. We was in Soho.
This can't be right.
Right, exactly. So like, this number, are you sure this is
a
right?
Mistake.
Right. And so in him doing that, I said, bro, why did you do that? Because I felt like her service was kind of regular. It wasn't super exceptional. And then he was saying that he thought it was exceptional, but we start going back and forth about her service. But then he had also did an act of service earlier too. And then he said one of his things was he wants to give back in those moments when he sees that he can give back. And I was like, that's pretty noble. That's pretty cool. But in the short span of us being there, I noticed he did. I said, so you only like doing it with white people? And he was like, wow. He was like, low key, I'm mad at you right now because you right, based off of. And that's what we're going to talk about. And it's like white acceptance, And so I was wondering, was he doing this to show, hey, I'm not one of those black guys. I'm not the stereotypical black guy. And then it had me wondering, do we all do that? Do we all, at some form or fashion, do we end up trying to prove? I don't know how should I word this.
Yeah, it's like trying to fit in,
right?
Trying to get validation.
Yes,
and yeah, I think it's funny. I never really thought about it like that, but I think we all do. Like, if you look at I ain't gonna say all, but a majority of black people, when just in general, right, in life, like you're always looking for that validation,
right?
And that validation is like it's like the pinnacle of validations.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like you look for validation from your parents first. That's the first validation that you learn to look for, and then it's your siblings,
your circle,
your friends. You know what I mean? And so it's like, we people want to be a part of something and they want to feel validated, and I think that's just another part of it. Of not really, because it's like once you get money, everybody kind of seeks that validation in a different kind of way.
Right.
It might be the cars, the clothes, the jewelry, the neighborhood you live in, the vacations you take, whatever it is. It's like, always kind of looking for that. And you go and buy designer clothes. You want to buy Gucci. It's like you're doing that. You want to wear a Rolex because you want people to know, hey, I belong here.
Right.
Yeah.
So how much of that do you think is just, hey, we're regularly doing that, but then it's like we're trying to adhere to a white standard as well?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a European standard. The material things, it's kind of like basing your validation or who you are or how good of I guess valuable you are to everyone else is kind of judged based on how much money you got, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When it's like it's not that much emphasis put on like helping out other people and somebody just kind of being down and you just looking out for them or whatever, and just the free flow of information,
Right.
that's not really part of the system, you know.
And you're right, because as I'm sitting here thinking about it, it could have been the 2 times he did his act of service, those people just happened to be white. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna allow that. But there were times when we were walking down Fifth Avenue and stuff, or wherever we was at, we saw black people that looked like they could need help too. And I probably wouldn't have thought about, oh, it's only for the white people, if he would have done some more acts of service,
right, for these people who clearly in need.
Yeah, because I was like, the 2 people that you did it for, not to say the waitress didn't need it, but the first woman, she didn't need it,
right?
And I was like, maybe
the first woman,
because the first
was a waitress.
No, she was just a lady. We sat at the bar, and she just happened to be there.
Okay.
And I started talking to her like, "Hey, are you?" And she was like, she asked. Actually, she was sitting. There was an empty seat by me, and she asked, "Is anybody sitting here?" And that's how we started talking. And she was an older white lady from Memphis, and she told us like, "Oh, I fell walking, and I felt so embarrassed." And she said, "I'm okay." And I don't know if that pulled at his heartstrings. You know what I'm saying? But when I was like, I feel like we do a lot of stuff based off of race, and we subconsciously don't even know that we're doing it. That's what I was kind of pointing out to him, because the times that I saw it, he was helping white women, and like you said, like we be buying clothes, even in the black culture, we're buying designer clothes that's by white people, but I guess it's almost like we're seeking validation through first impression,
right?
And especially at times being black, I feel that we already are judged just for being black. Now, somebody, that white woman from Memphis, she from the traditional South, she might go back home and be like, I met these 2 fine young black guys, and they were so nice, and they paid for my, and we might have changed the trajectory of her outlook on black people, and also the waitress that was our server. So I just thought that was an interesting thought, and like you said, validation, and then which goes back to first impression. How do you think first impression is that a real thing, or do you think that it doesn't even matter?
No, first thing, I feel like first impression definitely matters,
right?
But like as far as this situation though, I'm sure it wasn't their first time dealing with you know, interacting with a black person.
Right.
So I don't think that if they have a negative perception of black people, that would necessarily change it. I mean, the possibility is always there.
Yeah.
You know, but it's yeah, like in my experiences, you can be doing those things for a couple different reasons, right? So there's it's a little bit more nuanced, right? Now that I think about it, because it's like once you start making some money, the places that you're going to go to that you would consider a nice place, a nice restaurant, are going to be predominantly white establishments.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's, for me, being from Orlando, Florida, that's it. It's, you know, in Atlanta, Georgia, there are more options to, you know, visit a black establishment. But for the most part, in general, you start getting money, you start going to nice restaurants. Most of the time, that's going to be predominantly, you know, white restaurants. It's going to be owned by white people and probably run by white people and stuff like that. So, so when we start getting money, then we go into that environment, and that's the mode that we're in. Yeah. You know, and it's like, okay, well, I'm getting all of this from them, and this is how it goes. It's not like you would go to Chick-fil-A and give somebody $100 tip, or you know, the fish shop up the street and give, you know, it's like, okay, I'm having a certain level of experience, and this tip seems in alignment with that, you know?
And regardless of race is what you say.
Yeah, because it's just like, it's the experience.
Right. You know what? Now that I think about it, and I don't mean to cut you off, because white people who've been living an affluent life like that, that's all they know. Right. And I think with black people, at least for me, it was a learning curve that I had to learn to tip a certain way, you know, and the percentage of the tip. I remember I was kind of an adult when my homeboy told me, like, yeah, you're supposed to tip your barber. But nobody's ever told me that, you know. I was like, what's the price? That's the price. Right. But until he told me, like, yeah, you're supposed to tip them, I was like, damn, I've been going a long time without tipping them. Right. You know, but it's true, you know. So like now I automatically add in the tip for a lot of those things. But there was a learning curve and some humility to say, oh, I need to do this. Right. I've been shorting these people. Shit, right. You know. Right. You know. Right. And I think that's the I guess the difference within our community. Like, some people are going to think about their intention about, hey, I'm gonna put this on today because I'm going to this restaurant and this is in alignment with that restaurant. Right. Versus, like you said, going to Chick-fil-A. Right. So yeah, it's crazy, man, because I've been to New York a bunch of times. That was probably like my 6th or 7th time going. But that was one of the first times I went on, I would say, an upper echelon level. And I could not help but notice, like, I didn't see that many black people.